What if I told you a mother's love was so powerful, so unbreakable, that even death couldn't stop it? What if I told you a woman once stood guard, day and night, for months, battling beasts and scavengers, all to protect her dead sons? This isn't a legend. This isn't folklore. This is the real, hauntingly beautiful, and brutally tragic story of Rizpah, one of the most relentless mothers in history. And yet, most people have never heard of her. Why? Because her story is tucked away in the Old Testament, overshadowed by kings, battles, and prophecies. But today, we're bringing it into the light. Because Rizpah's stand wasn't just an act of grief, it was a statement, a protest, and an act of love so fierce, it changed the course of history. Stay with me, because once you hear what this woman did, you'll never forget her name. Let's set the scene. We're in ancient Israel during the reign of King David. It's a time of unrest, and Israel is suffering through a brutal famine, 3 years of hunger and desperation. Now, back then, people didn't just see famines as natural disasters. They saw them as divine punishment. And David, desperate for answers, goes to God. And God's response? The famine is happening because of something King Saul did years earlier. See, Saul had broken a sacred treaty by killing members of the Gibeonites, a group Israel had sworn to protect. That act of betrayal had consequences, and now justice needed to be served. So what does David do? He goes to the Gibeonites and asks, "What can we do to make this right?" And they demand something chilling. 7 of Saul's descendants must die. And among those 7, 2 sons of a woman named Rizpah. Pause for a second. Imagine the horror. Imagine being a mother and realizing that your sons are about to be killed for something they had nothing to do with. No trial, no mercy, just a brutal execution to settle an old score. Now, here's where most stories end. The deaths happen and history moves on. But Rizpah? She refuses to let her sons be forgotten. You might be wondering, why? They were already dead. What could she possibly do now? Here's the thing. Back in those days, the way a person's body was treated after death was everything. A proper burial wasn't just about respect. It was about dignity, justice, and even the afterlife. But Rizpah's sons, their bodies weren't buried. They were left out in the open, exposed to the elements, torn apart by wild animals. And for Rizpah, that was unthinkable. So she did something unheard of. She took a sackcloth, this rough, itchy fabric usually worn for mourning, and laid it out on a rock near her sons. And then, she stayed. For months. From the start of the barley harvest until the first rains fell, Rizpah kept watch. That's roughly 6 months. 6 months of chasing away vultures by day and fighting off jackals by night. 6 months of enduring scorching heat, freezing nights, and the unbearable stench of death. And yet, she never left. Now you might be thinking, surely someone saw her. Surely someone could have helped. Why did no one step in? And that's the heartbreaking part, because people did see her. And they didn't step in. They let her suffer alone, because she was just a concubine. A woman. A mother mourning children who, to them, were already forgotten. But Rizpah didn't care about their indifference. She stayed anyway, because this wasn't just grief. This was a protest, a defiance against injustice. A mother saying, "My sons may be dead, but I will not let them be erased." And here's the twist. Her silent vigil worked. Word of Rizpah's suffering reached King David. And when he heard about what she was doing, something in him shifted. He realized how wrong it was to leave those bodies unburied, to deny them the dignity of a proper resting place. So he ordered the remains of Saul's family, not just Rizpah's sons, but even King Saul and Jonathan, to be gathered up and given a proper burial. And only then did the famine end. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, okay, but why does this story matter today? Because Rizpah's vigil is more than just an act of grief. It's a testament to the power of perseverance, to the strength of a mother's love, to the idea that even the most forgotten, the most voiceless, can shake the conscience of the powerful. Her story reminds us that sometimes change doesn't come from kings or warriors. Sometimes it comes from the quiet, relentless endurance of someone who refuses to give up. And that is why Rizpah deserves to be remembered. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever heard of Rizpah before? And what do you think? Was her act just a mother's grief? Or was it something bigger? Drop a comment below because I want to know your thoughts. And hey, if this story hit you the way it hit me, do me a favor, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear about Rizpah's strength. And if you want more deep dives into the most powerful, hidden stories in history, make sure you subscribe. Because trust me, we've got more stories like this coming. Until next time, stay curious, stay relentless, and never forget the power of one person to make a difference.